All right. So I want to give a quick introduction about DMR. What is it? From a user's point of view. So I'm not going to get very technical. Hopefully, this is understandable. So the first thing to know is how it compares with regular radio. So regular radio operation, you go to a frequency, and if you want a little bit of more privacy, you might set a PL tone. If you don't know what a PL tone is, you can Google that, or there's videos on that, but you might set a PL tone and then you talk. So two people select a frequency, perhaps they set a PL tone and they can talk to each other. In DMR, we have more options than a frequency and a PL tone. You can go to a frequency, then you select a color code, which is equivalent to a PL tone. It's like a special sign there to differentiate you from other people in the frequency. Then you select a talk group, okay, which is another way to differentiate you and your party from other people in the frequency. You select a time slot, one or two. There's only two time slots you can select from, and then secretly you provide your DMI ID. The radio does this for you, and then you talk. So it's a little bit more involved, but it's not too complicated. You just set a frequency, a color code, just like you would do frequency and PL tone, and then you set two other things. It's not complicated. So what happens is that each frequency in DMR can be divided into two halves, if you will. These are the time slot 1, time slot 2, okay? Now, if these two guys want to talk on the frequency, they need to agree, and they need to say, okay, we're going to talk on time slot 1 on this frequency, on talk group 1, and with the color code 2, for example. They can make up these numbers. Color codes go up to, I believe, 14, and talk groups can be any number. So they select which talk group and which color code and what time slot in what frequency, and they just talk on it. And then maybe there's two other people in the same frequency, but they select a different time slot 2 in this case, with a different talk group number and a different color code number. And they can both talk, all four can be talking, two can be talking at one point in time, one on each time slot. How the frequency is divided in twos? Well, when we hear, there's a speed at which we hear, much like film has 30, 60, whatever frames per second. You can also hear at bits of sound per second, and they're not a lot, right? So what the frequency, what your radio does is that it divides that frequency and only scans that frequency every 30 milliseconds for voice. So it scans, for each second, it scans the first millisecond, skips the second 30 milliseconds, scans for the third set of 30 milliseconds, skip the fourth set, and so on and so forth, right? And then it scans time slot 2 in the alternate sets of 30 milliseconds. So it'll be scanning time slot 1 for 30 milliseconds, time slot 2 for 30 milliseconds, time slot 1 for 30 milliseconds, time slot 2 for 30 milliseconds. And that's fast enough that our ear cannot detect any cut in the speech, and two people can actually talk on one frequency, just in different time slots. So that's ham radio operation. You can just call someone on simplex as long as you set frequency, time slot, talk group, and color code. It's easy to set up. Check your radio on how to set up these things. They're usually not complicated. Now, most people don't talk in simplex, they talk in repeaters. So let's look at a regular repeater. A regular repeater, the repeater owner selects the frequency and the offset, and the repeater owner might select the tone. For example, here I have one from Repeater Book. Here's a repeater where, sorry, it doesn't show completely. Let me see if I can make it show completely. There you go. So this is a repeater, right? That shows me the downlink and the uplink. That's the offset, basically, right? It has an uplink tone, no downlink tone, and that's all I need to know. Everything else is just data about where it's located and whatnot. Now, for DMR repeaters, though, let me see if I can show you this. for DMR repeaters, there's more stuff to take care of. And here's, I can show you the uplink or the downlink. Let me see if I can show this to you. There you go. So the downlink, the uplink, so that's the offset, just like any repeater. But then because it's DMR enabled, I need to know the color code, in this case 1. I do not need to know its DMR ID, but it's providing it here. We're going to talk about this local network in a second. And then it tells me what talk groups are there. And it tells me, okay, talk group number 3 in time slot 1, talk group number 8 in time slot 1, talk group number 3 in time slot 2, talk group number 13 in time slot 2, talk group number 4000 in time slot 2, and talk group number 5000 in time slot 2, right? Now, it has some names here. These are names for these groups. You can name them whatever you want, right? In theory, you could name whatever you want. So it's the same information as a regular repeater, plus the things that we talked about, DMR, color code, and then talk group and time slot. Okay? Now, there's a lot of talk groups there, so we're gonna cover a little bit more. There are many questions that arise from what I just mentioned. So let's say, for example, now let me see if I can put this there. Okay. Now, DMR repeaters, like we saw, the repeater owner selects the frequency and the offset just like a regular repeater. The repeater owner selects the color just like the regular repeater would select the tone. And the repeater owner selects the talk groups allowed. We just saw that repeater had a finite number of talk groups. And the repeater owner selects which talk groups will go in which time slot, just like we saw with that repeater that I just showed you, the example that I just showed you. Now, let's look at, now this might be a little confusing, so let me see if I can center this thing somewhere in there. There you go. So, okay, so I have a repeater, for example, and in time slot 1, the owner selects to talk group 8976, arbitrary number, and it's going to call it Europe, for whoever wants to talk about Europe. I don't know. In time slot 2, this person's going to select, repeater owner is going to select North America, and it's going to give the number 3. So it's going to say, number 3, please talk about North America, or people from North America, right? In talk group 90, arbitrary number, talk about the world. And in talk group 1 to 3, talk in Spanish, for example. I don't know. These are very arbitrarily selected by the repeater owner. And the way you know these groups is by going to repeater book or something like that. Well, how do I connect to any of these things? Well, just like you would in simplex, you select your radio for the repeater frequency, the repeater offset, the repeater color, and a time slot and a talk group. That means that for every repeater, if you want to listen to all the talk groups in that repeater, you will have to program in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4 memories for the one repeater. One memory will have the frequency and offset and color and time slot 1 and talk group 8976, for example. The other memory is going to have the same frequency, the same offset, the same color, time slot 2, and talk group 3. The next memory is going to have the same repeater, frequency and offset, the same color, the same time slot, but a different talk group, 90, right? So in order for you to listen to all the talk groups in this repeater, you will have to have them all programmed. Most radios will program one for each memory, okay? Now the good thing is that these radios usually have thousands of channels, right? So one combination of frequency, offset, color, talk group, and time slot is one memory channel in most radios. You can Google how to program yours. So for the repeater that we saw earlier, right in here, I would have the frequency, which is you can't see it, but the frequency up there, color code 1, and I would have to program time slot 1, talk group 3. Okay, I would have another channel that has the exact same information except that talk group is 8. I would have another channel that has the exact same information except that time slot is 2 and talk group is 3, and so on and so forth. Okay, now, so when you listen, you will only listen, say in your radio you have tuned it to listen to the frequency offset color, and you have tuned it to listen to time slot 2, talk group 3. That's the only thing you will listen. If nobody's talking in that group, in that talk group on this time slot, you will not listen anything. Now, there are radios that have a digital monitoring, which basically will go to this frequency and offset and color, and sometimes time slot, and will just monitor any digital communications. And it will tell you, oh, it'll come up and it'll say, people are talking on talk group 90. So then you switch and then you can actually listen to them, right? When you talk, just like with any repeater, put one of the combinations of frequency, offset, color, talk group, and time slot, key in and say your call sign and then listening, and someone will come back to you, with that. Now, this so far is, you would say, why go through all the complication to listen to frequency when I can just, use a regular repeater?